When it comes down to the S90D from Samsung versus the LG C4 OLED TV, there's a lot to be considered between these two TVs this year, as it is pretty close, to be honest with you. More surprising of a result than I expected from these two TVs. I think that there is going to be a clear winner in one certain category, but more on that later. Now, when it comes down to the actual differences between these two TVs, the thing that you have to know about them is going to be the technology is different. So quantum dot OLED is going to be used for the Samsung S90D in most cases. Now, I say most cases because there are some S90Ds in the 42-inch, the 48-inch, and the 83-inch where they are going to be a W OLED, which is the same thing that the LG C4 is. So do keep that in mind if you're buying in those sizes. Also, in other regions, the S90D could be a W OLED. I made a video talking about that specifically. If you are in a different region other than the US, I suggest checking out that video before you purchase an S90D if that is where you land. Now, when it comes down to the operating system between these two, it's really a matter of personal preference. I think that the Tizen OS this year has gotten faster and snappier, and therefore is the faster OS now over LG's WebOS. But that's not saying much really because LG's WebOS just feels very dated still, despite some quality of life improvements. It does just feel kind of like a clunky operating system. To go along with that, they have a really bad remote, and that's just not any fun to use. So again, I think that could just boil down to personal preference. It is just easier to navigate, in my opinion, on the Samsung OS, just faster in general. And I think LG knows this because they have promised new updates to WebOS for every year that they are going to release the TVs. So if you buy a C4 this year, next year you're going to get WebOS 25. So that is good that they have a plan in place to keep things updated. Now, when it comes to keeping things updated, a lot of people are weary on a Samsung TV based on past events of them changing things with firmware updates. I don't blame you at all for that because there has been some complaints in the past about the Samsung OLED TVs getting changed too much for people's likings, and I know that happened a lot with the S95B, not so much with the S90C. We'll see what happens with the S90D, but those are things to be aware of. Now, that's kind of the differences between LG and Samsung on that front. But there's also differences within game mode as well. We're going to get into game mode a little bit later. But let's talk about the average picture quality that you're going to see out of this TV when you first turn it on. Now, before we get into things, I just want to be clear that I did purchase both of these TVs. Neither of them were sent to me by the manufacturers. But if you want to support the channel to help us get more TVs in for comparison just like this, please consider using my affiliate links in the description below if you are going to make a purchase on a TV this year. Thank you guys so much for your support. All right, without further ado, let's talk about picture quality. Doesn't matter what mode you use, the color brightness does stick out when you have these TVs side by side. You are going to see colors on the S90D that you just will not be able to replicate one for one on a W OLED. So color vibrancy is something that definitely will be an advantage for the S90D. Now, when it comes down to the overall brightness of these TVs, I have seen them trade blows quite a bit and actually match each other in brightness. So the C4 just got bright enough where it did match the S90D this year. So if you're just looking at overall screen brightness, there is really not a huge advantage to the S90D, although it is the more capable TV. You will see it at times be brighter than the C4, but it all depends on how the TV is tone mapping and the algorithm that is in place for these TVs. And when it comes down to that, that is a whole different discussion and harder to explain than you guys could even imagine. Just know that it translates into the TV's trading blows quite often. One thing that is very clear with these two TVs is that they are not like their bigger brothers. For example, the S95D just completely does blow away the S90D in a lot of scenes, and the G4 blows away the C4 in a lot of scenes as well. So Yeah, they're just on different playing fields completely. So if you're going to want the best of the best, you still want to look at the S95D and the G4. As you can see here, I am able to show you what the G4 and the S95D look like with these TVs next to it. And I'll do a comparison video with these four in the future using this same footage. So make sure you guys subscribe to the channel if you do not want to miss that. So I do have to reiterate that last year, the comparison between the S90C and the C3, man, that really wasn't close, but this year it is close. And it is more of a decision for people, I think, than it has been in the past because there is advantages to both TVs. For example, if you're going to play games, I cannot recommend the LG C4. I absolutely cannot. Now, I'm not saying that it's a bad gaming TV because if you buy this, you game on it, you're gonna like it. There's probably no doubt about that. But when they are side by side, there's a clear advantage for the S90D. And when I say there's a clear advantage, I mean it's a really clear advantage. Just take a look at these comparisons for yourself. They come through on the camera, even. And sometimes judging the TVs off of what I'm recording on camera, it's not the best thing to do. It's not really representative of what's going on most of the time. But when there is a significant brightness difference there, then yes, you can notice that. And when there's a lack of color brightness, then yes, you can notice that. So by default, the S90D does have better color brightness than the C4, but you put it in game mode and it loses even more color vibrancy than outside of game mode. So it is a mismatch in game mode. The S90D is the better gaming TV overall by a long shot. And when you're talking about standard dynamic range gaming, peak brightness is locked to off on standard dynamic range for the LG C4. This is not new. This is something that LG has been doing with their OLED TVs for a very long time. And when you have them side by side, it looks like the C4 is one of the dimmest TVs in the world next to the S90D. That's not really the case. It's just that there's no peak brightness option in game mode. So that's just really unfortunate. You can have a workaround with ALLM if your console supports that, but if you're using a Nintendo Switch, for example, you don't have access to that. So definitely keep that in mind if you're somebody who plays bright games on the Nintendo Switch and you like to crank up your standard dynamic range brightness. Because remember, not everybody plays in a cave and not everybody just likes to play dim SDR games. The other thing you have to keep in mind with game mode, you will have color banding on the LG C4 because the smooth gradation option does not work in game mode. It's there, you can engage it, it just doesn't do anything. And that's been like that for years from LG as well. Oh yeah, and I definitely can't forget to mention this. The LG C4 has temporary image retention issues. Whenever I had a white square on the screen, such as the HDR calibration, for example, and I got out of the menu and it just hung there for a second, and then I exited the menu system, it was still present on the screen. This is something that really did stick out and it didn't have to be on the screen very long for it to show up. So that is something that I just wanted to note for anybody that might be annoyed by static elements staying on the screen temporarily. I don't know if this translates to anything permanent in the future, but it is worth noting that it is fairly significant and it does take a couple of seconds before it actually fades away. So it can be distracting when you are gaming. I noticed it quite a bit when I was doing my live stream. All right, so it's clear that game mode is a mismatch. If you're buying these TVs for gaming, get the S90D. You're wasting your time with the C4 in my opinion if you are getting it for gaming. Now, when it comes down to content outside of game mode, watching movies, TV shows, your everyday TV watching experience, it's really just pick your favorite TV of the two. What has the best features available to you? Because the picture quality is almost one for one the same most of the time. And I would say that there are times where the C4 beats the S90D in picture clarity. I absolutely love the way that the Samsung handles gradients in the skies, for example, and the LG C4 doesn't do as good of a job here. They do have a smooth gradation filter, so that's something where you can clean up the color banding that is present on the LG C4, but there's virtually no color banding on the Samsung S90D. Now, I don't know if they have this permanent smooth gradation filter always on because sometimes it does look like fine details do get scrubbed away, and that is a downside to having smooth gradation on. So I wonder if that's just one of the downsides for Samsung having virtually no color banding in their image when you are looking at it. No matter what the content is, I've struggled to find any color banding at all. So that is worth noting. Now, one thing you may or may not notice when you get the TVs is that they do have a push of green for the LG C4 and a push of magenta for the S90D. This is especially true on certain off-angle positions for the LG C4, so that's something to keep in mind if you are going to sit off-angle on one of these TVs. You see that kind of issue on the LG C4 off-angle, and straight on, it's not as bad. With the S90D, it doesn't get any worse off angle. It's just the same off angle as it is on angle. It's just a slight tint of magenta. Might bug you, might not bug you. I personally think that the C4's green bugs me a little bit more. So do keep that in mind when it comes down to what it looks like out of the box. All right, so my buying advice to you guys would be this. If you are buying it for gaming, absolutely get the S90D. And if you are buying it anytime before Black Friday when the S90C isn't sold out, man, just buy the S90C over both of these TVs. And in my opinion, if you want the best gaming experience, it shouldn't be the C4. But when it comes down to movie watching TV shows, this is definitely more down to your personal preference. They are both really good at it. When it comes down to upscaling, they both do a really good job at it, probably tied in that aspect. And when it comes down to low bitrate streaming, I think that the C4 cleans it up just a little bit better than the S90D, but they're very close that I don't even think I would consider that to be a factor. And I would just say pick the one that has the least amount of features that would annoy you personally. So, which one are you guys going to go with, the LG C4 or the S90D? Please tell me in the comments. I would love to know your answer. I think it's closer than ever. And if you want to see more on these TVs, check out the rest of my channel and be sure to subscribe for future comparisons just like this. And if you want to keep watching TV comparisons, I think you'll like this one right here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.